Hello there, welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're here today. Welcome back to New York City. Welcome back to my tiny apartment. Welcome back to the mayhem that is trying to keep records straight in a small apartment. But today I'd like to talk about the Chad Kassem Analog Productions Acoustic Sounds Prestige Series reissues. Chad Kassem was nice enough to send me 4 records on the contingent basis that I review said records. So we have Gene Ammons' Boss Tenor, John Coltrane's first record on Prestige, fittingly called Coltrane, John Coltrane's beautiful early masterwork on Prestige, Lush Life, and of course, not to be outdone, Miles Davis Quintet Relaxin with the Miles Davis Quintet. But before I get into those, Robin Wyatt, who was the co-producer of this record, associate producer, and Michael Fremer, executive producer at Tracking Angle, were nice enough to send me an autograph. It's autographed. Their highly successful release, Rufus Reed Presents Kaylin Cardello. This record has done very well on Acoustic Sounds jazz charts, and so I would they were nice enough to send it to me. And some of you may be aware of the little kerfuffle I had with Michael Fremer. Fremer's an old friend of mine. He's been very helpful. He used to write for Stereophile. I still write for Stereophile, and we're cool now, but we weren't for a second. I contributed to this book. Might as well discuss it. Oh, In the Groove. Now this is a coffee table book for people just getting into the vinyl revolution, which is no longer revolution. It's been going on since about 2008, or the vinyl resurgence. And there were other people who worked with me on this book. I contributed historical chapters, how to assemble a system, what the other pieces in a system do, and I made some glaring mistakes. I made 4 glaring mistakes, and Michael Fremer called out those mistakes. Now, I haven't read Michael's review because I'm a rather sensitive old man, and I don't need people trashing me when I can trash myself just as well. So I haven't really read it, but from what everyone had told me, it was pretty scathing, and it was sort of a personal attack. So Michael and I met up. They have this event at the Power Station, formerly Avatar Studios, this incredible recording studio in Midtown, to talk about new Stenheim speakers, and the great Jerome Sabag, a wonderful French tenor player, whose last record, Vintage, is one of my favorite records of last year. He was there playing with his trio of Joe Martin and Kush Abadé on drums. And when you go into that studio, you instantly hear all these great records that you know by heart, like I do, like the first Michael Brecker album, or the early Kenny Kirkland albums, or Joshua Redman's I Wish album. That's the sound of that studio is profound. I've been in other recording studios that weren't as great as that. But anyway, Michael was there and I was there, and Michael said, can we talk? Are we friends? And I said, you're an asshole, man. But yeah, we're friends. We shook hands. Because Michael really can be an asshole. But to a degree, maybe he has a right to be an asshole. I don't know. Nobody has a right to be an asshole. But Mike knows so much about this hobby, and his knowledge and wisdom goes so deep. Never mind turntables. I would say he and Mike Trey, who write for Stereophile, are the 2 turntable gurus on the East Coast. Mike's, I forgot the name of his column. Mike's column is Stereophile replaced Analogue Corner that Michael had, and Michael's now at Absolute Sound, and that's great, and we're cool. But in saying that, I'm going to give you my honest opinion of this record. They sent me the record. I'd never heard of Kaylin Cardello. Of course, I've heard of Rufus Reed, and I'll jump the gun. If you want to hear 2 really beautifully recorded Rufus Reed records, I mean really beautifully recorded, they're on Nouvelle. Rufus Reed with Sullivan Fortner, and Rufus Reed, Steve Alley, DeDuca Fonseca, my friend, Sirius Quartet, also on Nouvelle. Also, what all these 3 records share is they were all recorded digitally and then pressed to vinyl. But I'll get back to these in a second. Let's talk about Kaylin Cardello. I looked him up a little bit. He is still studying, very young pianist, his debut recording. He comes out of the William Patterson tradition, you might say. Many of the great players in New York City came out of William Patterson. Bill Stewart, for one. It's like, that's a serious school for jazz studies. And he studies with Russell Malone. I would say he's very much a traditional old school player. He's just getting started. He's a young pianist. He is not yet in the league of other contemporary youthful young pianists like Dan Tepfer, Micah Thomas, Emmett Cohen, Gerald Clayton, Angelica Sanchez, Chris Davis, who are much more forward thinking. He is a young player. The best thing about this record is, and they cover standards, which is pretty cool, the recording is absolutely fantastic for the piano. This is one of the best piano records I think I've ever heard. You really get the entire depth and breadth and span of a beautifully recorded grand piano. And no surprise, this was recorded by James Wooett Clavier House, which is a piano-centric show hall or repair center on 11th Avenue in New York City. So these engineers focus on piano. So while the piano is really resolved and beautifully detailed, and he's a pretty good pianist, you know, he's a little hesitant in places. He's not taking any chances. He's not a burning mofo like the guys I just mentioned, like a Joey Calderazzo. He's a young guy from New Jersey. They cover Stablemates, If You Could See Me Now, Mean What You Say, Bolivia, Whims of Chambers. And it's nice, you know, it's not blazing hard bop. I don't want to call it background music, but for the sound of the piano is really beautiful. On the other extreme, the sound of the bass is a little soft, it's a little recessed, it's sort of right channel centric, while the piano spans the entire stage. So that's a little weird. Also weird, Rufus Reed presents Caitlin Cardello. There are no photos of Rufus Reed on the back, and on the front, all you get is a weird profile shot of his hands and his bass and his head. I mean, Rufus Reed presents. You think maybe we could have got a photo of Rufus Reed, who does talk on the record, but I just found it kind of weird that there's no photo of him. And the label is Liam Records, that I've also never heard of before. Oh, and they sent it to me in the sleeve, and it's already got a split seam on the bottom. Whatever. Am I nitpicking? No. I mean, if you want to hear a beautifully recorded piano and Rufus Reed at his best, this record, and this is another great young pianist, Sullivan Fortner, if you compare the bass recording on these two performances, they're night and day. The bass on this is firm, it's resolved, it's tight, it's up front, it's highly focused. As we're on this, it's kind of soft and recessed. You know, am I nitpicking? I don't know. If you got a rude record that says Rufus Reed presents, you got Rufus right here but no photo of him, I'm wondering, it's a piano recording, you know. So, but I will say, if you want, you know, many people say, and I agree, since a piano spans so many things as far as judging a system, it's percussive, it's ambient, it's tonal, it covers the entire frequency range. When played beautifully, it can be very fast, very driving, and in that way, this recording is wonderful because the piano just sounds pristine. It's really lush and beautiful, and that I really dug. But as I was saying, if you want to hear great Rufus Reed, check out these Nouvelle recordings where he sounds a whole heck of a lot better. Let's get into Relaxin, Coltrane, Boss Tenor, Lush Life. Now these are all, I would say actually, as are most of the prestige records from the late 50s, early 60s, records that any jazz fan should have in their collection. And in saying that, these are extremely hard to find in good condition. I'm lucky to have OGs of all these pressings. I work at a record store, as I have for a million years, and these records come through and I've grabbed them. And I would say the average price I have paid for clean original pressings of these is about $150 a pop. They don't come through the store very often at all. It's weird because even though Miles is very popular and sold a lot of records, none of his records come through the store that often. Neither these early records with the Great Quintet or the second Great Quintet with Tony and Wayne and Herbie and Ron. But let's compare these to my OGs. Some of these compared better than others. Now, You know, I'm an old saw. I always say, you know, the OGs sound better than these highfalutin young reissues. So, you know, it's not always true. It's a case-by-case basis. Even with tone poets, it really is case-by-case. Because just as each one of these recordings in their OG version sounds different, these sound different. So let's start with Lush Life. And I focused on Like Someone in Love, a duo with Coltrane and Paul Chambers on bass. The OG has presence. It's super clear. It's super dynamic. It's incredibly dynamic. Oh, and let me tell you about these. I'm reviewing these amazing speakers right now that have heightened my listening awareness. They're made in Germany by Inez Adler. They're called Voxative Arpeggios. They're about $12,000. This is a louder bass driver. I don't know if you can see this, with a folded horn. And they just sound phenomenal. I'm using them with my VPI Avenger Direct turntable, my Hana Umami Blue, which I know Mazzy also has one of the best cartridges I've ever heard, a Prima Luna Evo 400 phono stage, and the brand new Prima Luna Evo 300 hybrid amp, which is the front end, the preamp is tubes, and the power amp is solid state. And with these speakers, man, it's just an incredible synergy. The whole system really sings. I'm just really in love with the sound I'm getting. But that gave me even more insight into these records. So I will say the original has great clarity, deep tight bass, Philly Joe's brushes, or is it Art Taylor? Art Taylor's brushes are really clean and up front. I mean, it's a perfect recording. It's a great recording to judge a hi-fi because there's tons of dynamics. The tone from the great Paul Chambers and from Coltrane, great bass weight. It's really resounding. Compared to the AP, the Analog Productions, none of these are quite as loud. They have less gain, so I had to turn each one of them up when comparing them, you know, to get a similar volume level and dynamic level. So that was kind of weird. But beyond that, what else can I nitpick? There's less space, smaller images, smaller stage. Brushes are more recessed, but tonally, they're almost the same. All the Analog Productions pressings are quieter than my OGs, and my OGs are in perfect shape. I just mean that the vinyl is quieter, and that I hope you know what I'm talking about. Equally dynamic, equally tonal. You have to turn it up a little bit, but a great reissue. I was quite pleased with this. It doesn't quite meet it's not as live sounding and forceful as my OG, but as I said, it's quieter, and it really captures the essence, and though the bass is a little lighter, it's much, much cleaner. Then we will go on to Relaxin with the Miles Davis Quintet, and I played Olio as my comparison track. The OG, direct, very open, dynamic, a giant spacious stage. Both Train and Miles, the images are just huge and kinetic and live and really connected. Huge images. And really, really physical. And the AP, like the Lush Life, almost identical really in many aspects. It's the same tonally, it's a little recessed, dead quiet, similar energy and drive, similar texture. Both of these, all these comparisons have, the texture is very much the same. It's a little better on an OG, like when you're hearing Miles' trumpet on the OG, it is just bristling with life. You don't quite get that quite as much. The reissues are a little smoother overall, but they're just as dynamic. These don't suffer from what some tone poets to me suffer, is lack of the dynamics of the original pressings. Well, people say, well, Rudy boosted the upper mid. It's more than that, but I don't want to get into all that. But this has similar energy and drive, same very, very wide frequency range from Miles' trumpet to the lowest bass notes. Just as textural. So far, we're doing really, really well, wouldn't you say? Boss Tenor. This is one of these records, like all of Gene Ammons records, they're so great. This one has Gene Ammons, Tommy Flanagan, Doug Watkins, Arthur Taylor, Ray Barretto. And Ray Barretto and the Conga Patrol doesn't even bother me on this record. So many records from this period, they got to have Ray Barretto going, which kind of drives me nuts because I was a drummer, and when you're playing with a conga player, he kind of tamps down the rhythmic bed and you can't do a lot. And so I kind of go nuts. But on this record, it just doesn't get in the way because, you know, Gene Ammons is such a force of nature, and he made so many great records, and he has this huge, luxurious sound. You know, he's different from Coltrane. He's not as complex. He's different from Eddie Lockjaw Davis. I don't think he was quite as happy as Lockjaw Davis was, because Gene Ammons had drug problems, was in and out of prison. He's more of a blues-based guy. He's incredibly soulful, and this is one of his great records. It might have a little bit too much reverb, but it's a fantastic recording. Again, these are all great recordings that should be in your collection. I could not find my OG, but I know the OG has even more reverb than this does. So this is a little more present, a little more in your face, not quite as live sounding. But as I said, I think I paid about $150 a pop for each one of my OGs. These are available, I think, for around 50 or 60 bucks. And Chad Kassem is so consistent in this Prestige series. Mastered by Kevin Gray, pressed at Quality Repressings. You know, you get these beautiful sleeves that are perfect. When I interviewed Chad, he told me about all the trouble they go to in matching the fonts and matching the lettering, the typesetting. They work so hard, and that's why they're really the standard in a lot of ways. And as Chad said, a lot of people come to him now to do these reissue series because he's such a master at it. I mean, that's a level of lamination that is not on my original pressing. Same thing for the track I used on here, which was Straight Street. Rich, giant stage, has a really giant stage. It's a slightly larger group horn-wise. You have Coltrane on tenor, Johnny Splon on trumpet, Sahib Shihab on baritone sax, and I really want to find the Sam reissue of Sahib Shihab. Looks incredible. Then Red Garland, Paul Chambers, Al Heath. So it's a larger ensemble, and you really get the full breadth of the ensemble on this reissue. It's a very rich, full, fat soundstage, like the guys are standing in front of you. So it may be a little more present than my OG. So I hope that helps you out a little bit if you're looking at these Prestige series. You know, they're readily available. They're not crazy expensive. These are must-have records. I wanted to talk about a couple other things I'm going to start offering in my channel. You know, I have Jazz Vinyl Lovers, which is about 13,000 members now, and I often get messages there and on Instagram, people asking me about records. What do I think of this? What do I think of that? People ask me about hi-fi because I read for Stereophile, write for Stereophile, and I have all this gear in my tiny apartment. Upcoming, I have a review of the new Triode Lab 4-watt amplifier, which is amazing. But I think I'm going to start offering phone session chats. If you want to talk to me on the phone for a specific amount of time, for a specific dollar value, I'd be happy to do that with you. This is something that Steve Gutenberg, the audiophiliac, who inspired me to do my channel, he thinks I should be doing this. I'm not a good salesman. If you'll notice, I almost never say, please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. But if I can answer any questions for you or talk about hi-fi or my journey in hi-fi, you know, I started writing about high fidelity in 1995 for Six Moons, Positive Feedback. I wrote for John Darko, Stereo Times, everybody before I started doing Stereophile, thanks to Art Dudley. So I have a certain amount of knowledge and wisdom in putting a system together and giving you my opinions on the things I've heard, the things that I know sound great. You know, you get a level of liveness and transparency and tonal, you know, veracity on a really great system, and that you don't always get on a lesser system. All you're doing with the better system is peeling back layers of sound to get to the source, and that's the whole goal of this audiophile. I want to feel like I'm in the room with the musicians, and with my system, especially with these speakers, I can do that. Anyway, thanks, and if you want to give me a shout or talk, I'll put my email address in the description, and we can get her done. Thanks.